The words that you see on the screen are all words that, well, you know, I've been accused of. I've been accused of creating. I would say, to the extent that I have, the thanks are due to the handful, relatively small handful, of educators that fostered those characteristics in me. I think we all have to admit, this probably isn't your experience of the educational system. Is it your kids' experience? To the extent that we can get there, we can accomplish some magical things. And I'm going to argue that Renaissance is where we land. And that's the kind of world I want to live in. In fact, the precedent that I have for hacking this in the library is the Great Library at Alexandria. If you go back several thousand years, well, actually before that, I should say, Maria, this may be as close as you and I get to Italy. You'll recognize the Raphael's masterpiece, which is actually in the Papal Palace, which is in the Vatican, which is kind of inside of Italy, but that's it. What is this? This was painted during the high part of the Renaissance, so in the 15th century. But what is it? I'm going to argue it's a depiction of the Great Library at Alexandria. Maybe not literally, but certainly metaphorically. What do you see when you look at this? You've got 50, maybe as many as 58 people actively engaged for the best and the brightest, from Aristotle and Plato. The model for Aristotle, by the way, was Leonardo da Vinci. You've got famous names here. You've got Euclid, who invented the geometry that is still taught today. He's teaching his kids. Where? In the library. And those kids appear to be engaged. They don't appear to be sitting back kind of bored. Over on the side, you've got Pythagoras, as in the Pythagorean theorem. You've got Hypatia, the female character up on top, who was the daughter of Theon, the last keeper of the Great Library at Alexandria, and a bona fide scholar and mathematician in her own right. They're mixing. And if this is the library, you don't see a heck of a lot of books there. Granted, the book as we know it 20 years ago, the Codex was invented in the 15th century, but you don't see a lot of scrolls either. Now, there were a ton of scrolls in Alexandria. In fact, the Great Library was funded by Ptolemy I through multiple generations. Alexandria was a harbor town, and in order to dock in the harbor, you had to surrender all of your scrolls. They were whisked off to the library where they were copied. The copies were returned to you. They kept the originals. We can't quite get there yet. But what you've got is you've got names like Archimedes, Hero, Hipparchus, who invented trigonometry. All of these things, these names are people that actually lived and worked across the time span of maybe a couple centuries, but in the Great Library at Alexandria, not in Athens, not in Rome, but in Alexandria, Egypt. This is where they created this new knowledge, and it's critical that you recognize that the primary thing that's going on there is conversation, because that's at the heart of it. The knowledge that Alexandria was charged with collecting, all of the world's knowledge, is as much in our own heads and the heads of the best and brightest as it is in any scroll. In fact, the scrolls in Alexandria were kept in the Museum. Fast forward to the De La Mare Science and Engineering Library, which is housed in the Mackey School of Mines on the campus. They made the mistake of naming me to the head of that library in 2010. Beginning to discover the magnitude of that mistake. This is what the library looked like in 2010. You're looking at the sum total of the real estate within a 22,500 square foot building where you could actually talk with other people. The rest of it was book stacks with materials that were largely available electronically. But instead, the library continued to house, it's impolite to call it cordwood, but if it was being used electronically, that's the way that it was being housed. Well, we needed to get comfortable with what it means to be a library without those printed and bound books, because everyone knows it's online, right? It's all electronic, that's where it's going. What does it mean to be a library without the books? Well, you've got an archetype, the great library at Alexandria. That's what we need to be. We need to be getting this engagement, this activity, this conversation. How do you get there? How do you go from lonely, isolated, to active and engaged? Well, what we did is first we moved, by working closely with the Mathewson IGT Knowledge Center, we were able to migrate the bulk of the printed materials that were available electronically up into their 4-story robot. Great. If the apocalypse happens, we can recover them. That opened up 20,000 square feet, and we proceeded to start dumpster diving because we're all familiar with what the budget has looked like over the last several years. We were able to populate the 20,000 square feet with furniture that was repurposed from other buildings on campus, even around the county. The Washoe County School District actually donated a number of tables. We were able to triple the number of computers by using repurposed workstations, and we started doing things that the community needed. Might look like they're writing on the walls. You're absolutely right. In the sciences and engineering, you can run out of real estate on a whiteboard pretty easily, but you can't have enough. We actually added a couple thousand square feet and started using it. I'm here to argue that this is the magic that's going on. We've got, first and foremost, A Great Good Place. If you're familiar with the work by Ray Oldenkamp, A Great Good Place, well, what is that? It's subtitled cafes, coffee shops, you know, a bunch of different things. A hangout at the heart of the community. We needed this library to become a hangout at the heart of the communities it served first. And that's what we're doing. Some characteristics of A Great Good Place: everyone's on the same level. In this top picture, you'll notice that you've got faculty, you've got members of the local makerspace, you've got CEOs of local companies, you've got students. You can't really tell who's whom. That's the way it's supposed to be. Down here, again, you've got active engagement. Everyone has an equal voice. That's the conversation here. Another characteristic, in addition to, is that it's important that any of the events that you have are typically unscheduled. This is where we run screeching headlong into most traditional practice at libraries. They're unscheduled. They're largely unplanned. They are even, dare I say it, spontaneous. An example, Michio Kaku. My physicist geek is really sort of coming out here, but he's an astrophysicist. I mean, he's a rock star to me and to a number of the kids that use the library. He was giving a lecture on campus, and the dean happened to bring him by the library. Hey, presto, instant one-on-one for several hours with arguably one of the most famous people these kids are going to meet. You can't buy that. That's the kind of thing that encourages you to come back again and again. And when you're back, you're talking with folks. Another aspect that tends to be difficult for libraries to pull off is that it's playful. There has to be this sort of light sense of it. You'll notice up in the top corner, you've got a whiteboard competition. Yes, that is Cthulhu drawn in the side there, along with UFOs attacking. On the right-hand side, you've got the concrete canoe team, draws from across the College of Engineering. By the way, a shout out to them, just won the regional championship again. They're going to nationals. This is such their hangout that they've chosen to display their prized possession, the 2008 winning canoe, in the heart of the library. Yes, that's the score. That's what we're shooting for. They're also working hard. Some of the best and brightest kids, humans versus zombies. You got to be okay with that. That's cool. Other events that are spontaneous. Again, Bill Nye, the science guy, came to give a presentation. The kids came to us and said, we want to have a science fair. Let's have a science fair. We loaded up the 3D printer and hauled it off up to the student union. Some of the students, you'll see one of them brought his air cannon. Yikes. We're launching things across there. There's even an electric vehicle that was designed after one of the first atomic bombs ever used in warfare. We turned it into a reindeer because the kids wanted to decorate for Christmas. That's cool. I don't know how they knew I had a Santa suit, but again, the core of this, though, is the shared resources. This is what enables the library to take this far beyond what any cafe or coffee shop is going to do. Of course, you know, libraries are all about shared resources. That's what they do. I'm here to argue that libraries have come a long way since Gutenberg invented the printing press.
So we all know that MLA citation involves a number of strange things, formatting wise. But one thing in particular that's come up recently is the idea of a hanging indent. So here I am on one of my favorite English websites, the OWL at the Purdue University. So if you want to make a note of this website, it's pretty handy for all kinds of things MLA related. But here's just a sample works cited page. And you'll notice that the first line of each entry is over here where the left margin of the paper is going to be. And then second and third and fourth lines, if there are any, get indented, that little gap of 5 spaces. This is the reverse of what we think of as a normal paragraph, where a normal paragraph starts with an indented line and everything else is left with the margin. So this is called hanging indent. And if you're using Word or another word processing program, you can select all and have it formatted that way. Google Docs isn't quite as user-friendly in that regard, so I want to show you how to do this in Google Docs. So here's just a straight up annotated bibliography that someone turned in for summer quarter. So you'll notice that, it's just typed, everything's over here on the left-hand margin. So to get it set up with hanging indent, what I want to do is go to Edit and select all. And now you see the little triangles up here at the top. These are our margin sets. So for whatever reason, you can't move just the bottom one. You have to move them, at least initially you have to move them both at the same time. So if I can grab both of them. No, I keep grabbing the wrong thing. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to move this over to the halfway mark between 0 and 1. So it's over here at 0.5. And that pushes everything over to the left, to the 0.5 mark. Now I'm going to grab just the little small blue bar at the top and drag it back to the right. And you'll notice what that does is set up hanging indent. So again, the first line over here at the margin, everything else is indented 5 spaces. So when you're doing your essays, obviously you don't want to hit select all, but you want to highlight just your works cited entries to do this, but it should work for you. So let me know if you have any problems. Hopefully this helps a little bit, make your life just that much more simple as we head up to the end of the quarter.